We spoke a little bit about just before the panel, about how women in rural areas, important constituency, studies have shown that supporting programs that support women lead to behavior change, lead to a lot of benefits for families. And women are often isolated in rural areas, and there's a need for community. There's information wars around their bodies. As the Chief Information Officer of Bayer Pharma, perhaps you might tell us a little bit about your perspective.
Thank you, and I'm a host by proxy because we're happy to work with the foundation. And the work we do with the foundation is a lot on family planning and contraception, because I think, and we are all convinced, that one of the first steps of being empowered as a woman is to be able to manage your life, manage your family planning, being empowered to study if you want, being empowered to also decide when you want to have children, and to also give yourself time for building your work, your activity, your economic contribution. And it's extremely important. On the other hand, when I think about what we do in developing technologies, what the technologies can do is also give access to reliable information, distribute reliable information, education on basic health. That can be, I would say, the most powerful prevention we can think about reproductive health, which, as you say it rightfully so, is a kind of a political battle territory now. And it's all those things, think about if you're isolated, you don't have access, you're not going to walk or drive or take transportations to do 30 kilometers to ask simple questions. You want to have access, you want to be able to make your own decisions and get more information for yourself and also for your family health. And I think it's managing this aspect gives more time, more bandwidth for the women who are isolated and most of the time they're in charge of growing the crops and in charge of the economic sustainability of the family.
And to that point about their crops, information is also important for women to be able to sell their crops at the right price for their economic independence.
Very concretely, I was yesterday with the Women's Forum in Berlin, and we also had a discussion with somebody from Microsoft explaining that broadband access, what it meant in rural areas, was this lady, thanks through this data access, could get in contact with an association helping her to get solar panel, to get a bit of electricity. And that little solar panel helped her to have power to pump water, which removed at least 6 hours of burden from her daily schedule. So she had more time to grow her crops, more time for her family, more time for her community too. And in addition, she said, okay, what it means for me is not to get access to entertainment or whatever. It means I can reach out to other customers I would not have been able to reach. I can sell my crops to more people. And it completely changed the game for her. More time, more revenues, also more engagement in the community to help others. And this can make a very big difference. It's just one isolated person. Right. But if you multiply and amplify that, it can make a really big difference.
And Dr. Obi, you have a unique perspective on women's empowerment as a jury member of the Bayer Women's Empowerment Awards. Curious what you've learned and what you've observed as in awarding these prizes to these wonderful innovators.
I think that the key thing I have learned is how not so smart the world is. Because by ignoring what women carry, we show that our world is not that smart. Because getting women to be productive basically makes all of us better. You're not doing something nice for women.
Sure.
We have seen the data speak to the fact that if the world removes the barriers that stand in the way of women's productivity, that many economies will actually add leaps and bounds to their existing GDP, especially in countries in Africa. We have absolutely no business being begged to connect our women to the development process. You look at the SDGs, the continent needs more than $1 trillion annually to invest in achieving the SDGs. Where's that going to come from? It's going to come from the pittance that government can so far mobilize. And then some development aid, you know that there is fatigue because domestic context for aid is really toxic now. A lot of populism is making that difficult to be a source that you can rely on. And then the rest of it has to come from private sector. But private sector is limited by some of their wrong interpretation of risks. Because one of the things that I say to private sector globally is you seem to assume that the only region where the name called risk resides is Africa. But I can say to you that risk was all over the places in New York and in the European capitals when the irresponsible behavior of the financial sector people took the entire economy of the world down. That was major risk. Nobody ran away permanently from investing. So clearly, we look at all these sources, and it's so much of a pittance, which was why I was celebrating all of the people in the room. Because when private sector is limited, when public sector is limited, the people must arise. And the people who are doing these social enterprise efforts are basically arising. So what does that connect to in terms of women? What it connects to in terms of women is the data that says to us that when a woman is productive and a woman earns income, that 70% to 80% of that income is going to go to the problems of the SDGs. The woman is going to make sure that children have access to health, the entire family, including the man. Women sometimes not be grateful, actually. They have access to health services. The children would be educated. There are certain assets that will be acquired in order to improve the family. That says to us that women are so important to solving the problems that we have in the world. And so the right sets of public policies that would support that process are the things that we need. And so when an organization like Bayer says, we don't want to just be a pharmaceutical company. We want to have this foundation and focus on social enterprise, they are onto something interesting. And it is a matter of figuring out how to do this at scale, so that it's not just a tiny intervention.
Sure. And what do you see as the next step to sort of, the wonderful innovators, the women innovators who won prizes last night and all the previous years, what would you say is the next step to giving their work the visibility and connecting it to all the important programs?
It is to be deliberate about it. We can't simply say, we need to give them visibility and then we all go away. No, we have to be deliberate. A friend of mine, Negroponte, he was Deputy Secretary of State, I think under George Bush, the son. And he said something that stuck with me. He said, nothing happens that is not made to happen. Nothing happens that is not made to happen. If we really want to get these women that have at least been on the Bayer Awards, if we want them to become the mega women of enterprise in the world in the next 10 years, we can achieve it. Well, we would achieve it. What we would simply do is we would identify what the barriers are to moving them to that next level. And we just keep removing the barriers. That's what growth is. Growth is that you take away the barriers stopping me from growing, and I grow.
Yes. Very true. That's very true. Often people know what they need and they
Yeah.
can work for themselves. We
Yeah.
just need to
Yeah.
provide an environment.
Couldn't we have a series where, today's world, they just love to celebrate a lot of, nice looking stuff. So couldn't we have a series that puts these women in our faces globally every month? So we're talking about some of these women, just the fact that they got a mention on a program on CNN, and suddenly their phones will go off the hook because people are calling them and saying, I saw your product on CNN. Can I have it? Why? Because they just want to identify, right?
Yes.
And so this is a platform. We must leverage and maximize the name Bayer for these women. A very small scale woman who has shown up on our screen at Bayer becomes small woman times Bayer. That's mega.
Thank you.
Lisa, as the incoming Deputy Director for Women's Empowerment at the Gates Foundation, and you also mentioned that you've started 45 microfinance institutions. You've worked directly with empowering women and in a sector that has provided us many insights about the benefits of supporting women. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what you've learned in your extensive experience working in rural areas.
Well, it's hard to follow Dr. Obi. But yeah, I think that two things that you mentioned around risks and barriers are major things that we need to focus on. Siek and I have actually been working together for the last 7 years in Africa, trying to make digital innovation work for women. How do we get all kinds of services, bundles of services to women on digital channels, which is lower cost and can reach the deepest rural areas? And I think that one of the things that we learned was that we would design for women and then they wouldn't come. And then we would design for women and they just wouldn't come. And so we started at one point just trying to look at social norms and different kinds of factors around women, and we realized that when you're designing for women, when you're trying to reach women, when you're trying to include women, you have to think of them holistically. You have to think of the barriers that they have, like maybe my husband won't approve me getting my own bank account this time. Maybe they won't allow me to take a loan. I'm not quite sure my mother would approve, that kind of thing. So, I think that what we're looking at doing at the Gates Foundation is a very holistic approach to women's behaviors, to meeting them as mothers. What we found in agriculture for sure is that women are responsible for the household costs as well as running a business. They've got a lot of things going on inside of that household. So I think that the social entrepreneurs here and the incredible products and services that they're developing are beginning to chart a pathway, not just for women as social entrepreneurs, but also for women as clients on the other side of it. And that's the kind of scale that we need. That's very, very inclusive, and we have to have a strong design lens around the realities of women and the needs of women that meets them where they are.
It's very interesting. I think a point that you're making is women-centered design perhaps is something that we don't think or speak about enough. You touched upon some of the elements. I'm curious how you approach designing projects for women.
Yeah, one of the partners that we had in Tanzania was a major mobile network operator that was allowed in only because they were meant to serve rural areas, and we helped them to design a mobile package of services, learning and financial services and access to markets and great seeds, and they got a huge response, 600,000 farmers signing up right away. And we said, yeah, but who are they? So we did the data analytics and found that only 10% were women.
Wow.
And they were themselves quite horrified. I mean, this whole idea of gender-based data analytics is critical for our entire agent. It's amazing how many organizations don't even know how many women they serve. But of course, when this mobile network operator realized that they were only serving 10% of the market, they realized that they could serve so much more. And so they were interested in looking and figuring out why. And the crux of it was that they were going out and they were acquiring farmers on market day in markets where women don't go. And all they had to do was take the exact same product and switch it to where women's groups were meeting, village associations were meeting, and boom, So I think a lot of it is really honestly understanding the same product, exact same product, work just as well for women if they just meet women where they are.
And is that because women are less visible, than women's networks are sort of, they're not part of the conversations? That's why the programs didn't reach them in the way they should?
Yeah, I think that as we started looking at social norms around what's happening for women, every country is different, every context is different, every value chain is different. But one thing that's consistent is lack of mobility. I mean, women can't move the way that men do for many reasons. And that could be gender-based violence on the road. That could be just simply not having the money for the bus ticket. It could be the fact that you're taking care of your parents and your children back on the farm, or just social norms that you're not allowed to walk out that door. So there are a lot of women, there are a lot of ways to meet women where they are that we're learning really work.
Right, and I guess, Siaka, that's a good transition to your work because as the man on this panel.
But for once, we get to dominate men.
Digital technologies are very important to meet women where they are, to offer women access to information, to community. And at AgriFin, you have a program that's working with 130 companies to reach women in rural areas. You could tell us a little bit about how.
Thanks, John. And it's really hard to speak after all this great. At least adding to most of the work that we're doing. So she's explained quite a bit of the stuff that we do. And it's over 170 companies right now. I think maybe just touch on a few things. One that Lisa mentioned, data is so important. When many of the organizations that we work with are not disaggregating their data across gender and various other spectrums. And when you do this, it's like looking into a magic mirror, because it starts to answer so many questions. I'll give an example. We were doing supporting one of our partners who was doing research into repayment for agricultural loans. And when they looked deep into the data, they first saw that more women were defaulting at 90 days than men. Yeah, so there were more women defaulting. So the first thing was, why are women defaulting? And the premise has been that women default less than men. Then when we looked at the data even deeper, we saw that even though they defaulted at 90 days, more women were likely to repay the loan after that. And so we started to find out, okay, what's this information? More women than men were likely to repay the loans. So when we looked deeper into the data and we did some qualitative analysis, we found that many of the women who defaulted said, look here, at the end of the month or at the time when this loan was requested for repayment, I had to take care of health, school fees, and a number of things. But I'm definitely going to pay this loan. And we saw that women are more loyal in terms of giving that loan. So how do you manage the timeframes? How do you then create a product that works around those challenges that women face so that you can manage the experience a lot better? And without doing that data analytics, then you're unable to then tailor-make your products. You're unable to create propositions that work for women. So I think Dr. Obi mentioned that you need to be deliberate. At AgriFin, what we do is when we look at our partners, we score them across a scale or a continuum. Are you gender intentional or unintentional or blind towards the far extreme where are you gender transformative? And we walk with our partners through this journey to help them understand the benefits and not just to stumble on the opportunity that exists around working with women and empowering them. One of the insurance companies, very interesting that Pula also mentioned the same thing. One of the insurance companies that was trying to push insurance to farmers found out that the best way to actually get farmers to buy insurance was to sell to them in groups. And who are the people who are most organized in groups in rural areas?
Women.
It was women in VSLAs, very organized. Not only are they organized in groups, but they're saving together and they have the money to pay these premiums. So then they had to go back, rejig their strategy. Okay, who are the best people to sell to these women in groups? Yeah, the agent network had to transform. We had to increase the number of women selling to women. So it differs in different contexts, but more often you'll find that women agents, due to social norms, etc., have more access to other women, and they can talk the language, they can help them understand and take them through that journey. Yeah, because of the homogeneity and the general diffusion of innovations. So learning the data, understanding the data, and then having a deliberate strategy around how you move towards being more gender transformative. Another thing that we've also found is that the organization itself needs to also put women at the center. Yeah, they need to understand how are we treating women in our organization. It was very interesting. I was talking to, I think, a number of the winners yesterday had their children here, and I was speaking to the Claire from Farm to Feed, and she was mentioning something simple like, why isn't paternity leave for men the same amount of time for women? And that's because if a man also has the same time off, he can be able to support the woman when she needs to do other things as the baby is growing. Yeah, for example, attend this conference. Yeah, she needs to come to this conference and she probably needs a partner who can be there to take care of the children. So these kind of policies, ideas around the organization need to be fostered so that the company can really think about how they are empowering their women. And then this trickles down into how you're thinking about every product and service that you're delivering to the market. So quite a bit of learnings. Agrifin has created a toolkit in conjunction with CGAP and a number of other partners that can help organizations that we work with go through this transformative journey. So I urge you to go to the Agrifin website. You'll see our toolkit. And it's a working document. We want organizations to add. It's got, to answer some of your questions, how to do a human-centered design around creating products for women. It's got a number of questionnaires that you can answer as an organization to see where are you in that gender continuum journey and how can you do certain things to improve on that work.
Very interesting. So yes. That's something maybe many organizations in this room could benefit from, of this kind of evaluation and transformation. Any questions? We have this very distinguished panel. I can keep going, but I'm curious, would like to open it up. I know it's early in the morning. Yes, please.
Good morning, everyone. One question has, most of you have actually touched upon digital tools and how they are obviously central to being able to scale up impact right fast. I was just, since we're talking about women empowerment, I was curious to hear about your perspective and experience